I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. Public transport has always been a challenge in South Africa. More than 20-odd years into democracy, it still reflects the apartheid spatial planning realities, with commuters braving overcrowding, unsafe taxis and trains and buses. Now, COVID-19 has only amplified this reality as we are about to move down from level 4 to level 3 of the lockdown. Safety measures here could be what stands between millions who will be returning to work and contracting the COVID-19 virus. Joining me to look at the measures put in place to ensure social and physical distancing on our trains, buses and taxis is, of course, the Transport Minister, Fikile Mbalula.
We are now embracing what is called the new normal. Our way of life is going to include going around with masks. When you come to the taxi rank, it is now going to be in law. It is in law. It is the law that when you come into spaces like this and meet many people in the taxi rank and so on, you must keep a social distance, you must be sanitized, and then you must have a mask. In principle, we are agreed to support financially the taxi industry. So don't leave home when you go to the taxis, when you go around meeting other people without your mouth being covered.
Now, those are, of course, the minister's preparations as we await President Cyril Ramaphosa, who will be addressing us this evening at 7 o'clock. And there's great anticipation that some sections of the country will indeed move to level 3. Minister, good morning. The insert shows that you are getting ready, and you're also talking about financial support. Let's talk about the readiness first. Are you confident, should we move out of the lockdown under level 4 tonight to level 3, that public transport will indeed be safe?
We have to make it safe, Karima. Public transport is all in our hands. Government and the people who will be using public transport. The commuters who have been very cooperative. The operators who must do their job to deliver on the safety measures, and government to ensure that the regulations we have introduced for safety measures are implemented. I have been looking at the buses, and this coming week we'll be looking at the trains, and then also the airspace in terms of both domestic and international flights and flights in general. Are they ready? How are they ready? And talk to them about their challenges and so on. So we're looking at that, Karima, particularly as we open the economy, and many people, about 8 million South Africans will be back to work as it is anticipated with the opening up of the economy and the easing down of the lockdown.
Now, Minister, you spoke about the fact that you are going to be looking at different modes of transport. In that insert, we saw you at the taxi ranks. In this morning's City Press, people are talking about a sanitation area where people get sanitized before they enter the taxi. And in this article, you are quoted as saying you're going to be giving assistance. Just take us through what an average commuter's experience will be like if they, let's say, go to Bree Street tomorrow morning.
What is happening at the present moment, sanitizers have been given, supported by government in all provinces. We've been giving sanitizers to taxi operators. And secondly, we also provide for masks for commuters. But over and above that, it is said that you can have any piece of cloth that cover your mouth and also your nose. You can design it yourself at home. so that when you go to public spaces, especially that are congested and are duty bound to be congested, like taxi ranks and so on, you've got to be covered all the time. And when you get there, you will be sanitized. By law, in terms of our regulations, the taxi driver and the operator is supposed to sanitize all the commuters in the taxi rank. What they've been doing over and above that is to disinfect the taxi itself, which you would have seen. I did that in Johannesburg at Faraday taxi rank. So those things is part of the new normal. It is expected that should happen. But over and above that, the Department of Transport is also looking at securing walking-in booths, which is scanning booths that you have seen at Gautrain, and we'll be rolling them out systematically in all provinces, all taxi ranks throughout the country.
Now, there's also talk that the taxi operators or the drivers will take people's temperatures and also write down their names, because there is an expected spike that's going to come, given that more people are going to have contact. How are you going to make sure that this happens? I mean, taxi ranks are very congested. How are you going to make sure that the queues are in fact designed in such a way that people are social distancing? You've had these regulations before, and some operators have complied and others simply haven't. Do you even have the staff to enforce compliance?
That is why I say it is a social compact. It's a working together. It's not that government, otherwise we wouldn't have enough resources to do that. It is expected that the taxi marshals will be trained, and some have been trained. As you would have seen, I've been into Ivory Park and Ravi Ridge this week with the Department of Health in Gauteng and the Department of Transport, training marshals, getting them tested so that they can utilize the same equipment to undertake the mission to test people. But there are volunteers all over. But in the long run, you will understand that as much as we've got health volunteers and health workers, that task must be taken up by the operators themselves, to ensure that in the normal way of doing their work, they are able to screen people, register them. Those that are suspicious, they don't get into the taxi. So every taxi, every individual must have a mask, must be sanitized, must be screened. And yes, that's what normal entails. Now,
in the introduction, you also said that government is committed to assisting the taxi industry financially. At the moment, we have a 70% occupancy rate. It's already difficult to practice social distancing in that, with that percentage. With lockdown 3, Minister, can you share with the country if you are going to increase that amount? Is the 70% going to stay in place? And what kind of financial assistance are you going to give operators that will obviously not be running at maximum capacity?
We are still in the process of consultation, and once the President has spoken about the new directions of the level 3, he will actually give us a further mandate to further, look at our directions, and that will include the seating arrangement, which is 70%. But overall, in terms of the lockdown, we have agreed in government to assist financially and support the taxi industry exactly for that particular reason. And we were discussing the modalities. And this week, I hope to actually make a final announcement and a firm proposition in terms of how much we're going to invest in this financial support and the modalities of the rollout of that financial support for the taxi industry.
Just in terms of the actual money, I mean, where are you going to get the cash from? We know that, the lockdown has come with a series of economic measures and some kind of relief. But, I mean, the state has had difficulty in raising funds as it stands. Where do you hope to secure this money from, Minister? And what kind of figures are we talking about?
The President talked about 500 billion, and in that he included industries that must be supported who are in distress, and that included the taxi industry. So that's where the money actually comes from. The money that has been already now been disbursed in terms of the unemployed and all of that, and in generally those who benefit from social security net, industries like the taxi industry, that is highly unregulated, which at the time of the coronavirus we were discussing and were going forward to discuss the formalization of this particular industry. But that it may be, we are caught up in the coronavirus, and as you can see, they are affected in relation to the percentage of the number of commuters they've got to carry, and that have generally affected their financial setup. So we will put a hand in that. I am not going to be in a position to tell you how much up until I announce, and all other things between the Treasury and ourselves and all members of the industry itself in terms of the modalities of how this is going to be rolled out are actually finalized. And I hope to do that this coming week.
Now, Minister, one of the big things, of course, is interprovincial travel. I've seen a draft of the level 3 lockdown arrangements, and it looks as if provincial travel is going to be allowed. We've seen particular provinces, particularly the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, spiking and being far ahead of the rest of the country, both in terms of infections and deaths. Are you concerned that interprovincial travel is going to present particular problems, and most importantly, how are you going to regulate it, particularly long-distance travel where people obviously have to stop, along the way? That's incredibly difficult to police and to monitor.
Should the president give us a go-ahead to have interprovincial travel, and at lockdown 4 at the present moment, we issued the directions to allow intra-provincial travel in terms of the district-to-district travel, and we'll then outline the details of that interprovincial travel, who is affected, and how is it going to actually happen. We are going to do that. The draft you are referring to, I've seen it in the WhatsApp groups and so on, is written confidential draft. It is fake, actually. So what will happen is that ministers like myself in transport, we will give directions of how that will actually unfold. Is it full travel for everybody in terms of, and who else is permitted to travel, and how, and we'll outline all of those once the president has spoken this evening, and he will also outline whether or not we live into what level, and how in this we are going to differentiate provinces in terms of their levels of how they are affected by the disease, and also probably deal with the question of the readjusted risk. Remember, what we are doing, moving from one level to the other, we are dealing with the mechanism of readjustment of risk. It's not like just opening up. If that was the case, everybody would be in the street now. Everybody would be in church. Everybody would be in the street. Everybody would be partying. That is not the case. We easing down the lockdown, meaning we moving gradually from level 5 downwards up until to level 4. Remember, the advice we got was that we must not move abruptly in doing things in easy, but we are moving out of the lockdown, and at the same time, with the emphasis of hotspots, we now know that is what level 5 have helped us to do. We now know where is our biggest Achilles in terms of the infections. It is the Western Cape, it is Gauteng, and how do we attack that? It is called, in simpler terms, differentiated approach. So it is what we are doing at the current moment, considering a whole range of issues. But my task as a Minister of Transport into the NCCC, it is to ensure that as we open up, How do we then deal with public transport, and how do we manage it? The issues of percentages, do they stay, and how do we sanitize? How do we disinfect the mode of transport that we are opening up? As you can see, trains are not open up. If we are to open them up, maybe at level 3, depending on what the president says, what preparations are we going to do? When I'm finished with it now, I'm going to be having a very solid and a preparations state of readiness discussion with the PRASA team.
Absolutely. In fact, Minister, let's take a short break quickly. When we come back, we will talk about what it is that you're going to be discussing with that PRASA team. We know, of course, trains are very unreliable, often overcrowded, and it'll be interesting to see whether PRASA has the capacity to ensure physical distancing and safe public transport, particularly on trains. Don't go anywhere.